And we'll kind of close this segment with the litany, and then I'm going to pull up the next segment, which will kind of serve as a reflection and closing prayer on the 7 sorrows and 7 joys of St. Joseph. So that's how we'll kind of close out our day. So let's talk a little bit more about virtue, okay? Obedient, Joseph most obedient. Again, taken terms from the litany. And I think obedience gets a kind of a raw deal. Because I think in our minds, at least maybe you're not like this, but when I deal with students, I think they see it this way, and I do too sometimes. We think of obedience in terms of blind obedience, not obedience. There's a difference, okay? And it's very important we know the difference. To be obedient means to listen. That's what it means, all right? And I think so often we get confused and think, well, obedience means I do everything you tell me to do. No. Okay?
My kids would be happy for that.
What?
My kids would be happy.
Yeah, I know. You might not want to share this with your children. Wait till they're older. Kind of grasp it, right? That's great. But to listen, obedience means just that, to listen, okay? Now, granted, when I was growing up, when Mom said, listen to me, it meant do what I'm telling you to do, right? I mean, that's usually what we mean when we say listen. But that's not really listening. And when we talk about obedience and listening, again, we're going right back to that idea of discerning truth. When I listen, I'm looking for the truth, okay? And because I'm not obedient to a person, I'm obedient to something greater than that, right? I'm obedient to God because God is always good. God is truth, right? But it may take me some time to listen and discern that. So when we think of obedience, I think it's really important that we keep that in mind even in our own life, right? Because I believe part of the growth in our faith is that we really listen. We don't just blindly do. We listen. I think dealing with youth for so many years is a part of this. You know, and you probably see this in your own life. You know, when I was young and my parents said, go to church, go to church, go to confession, go to confession. You know, I kind of did what they told me to do because I was listening and obeying, but I really couldn't put it all together yet in my head, right? I was just kind of following what they said because I trusted them. I trusted what they were saying. But as I got older, I needed to know why. Right? I needed reasons. Just don't tell me to go to church, all right? I need to know why I go to church. Why am I doing this? I need to know why I go to confession. I need to understand who this God is, right? And that, to me, therein lies the difference. And I can see this with my students. I can see the students who are really listening. They're searching. They want the truth. And then I just see the students who think, yeah, the church is a bunch of rules and, it doesn't really make a difference in my life, right? So when we talk about Joseph's obedience, he listened to God. He obeyed because he knew he could trust God. And we do this today. I listened to my parents growing up because I could trust them. Even if they couldn't theologically articulate transubstantiation to me, okay? It was still something I wanted to figure out for myself to make sense. And once it made sense, I stepped right back kind of into this mystery, right? So the idea is I think so often when we think obedience, we're thinking just do what I say. That is only the prerogative of God, in the sense that when God speaks, we listen. Okay, we obey, we listen. we listen to one another, but knowing we're all fallen individuals. I'm fallen, you're fallen, right? There's lines of confession, shows we're fallen, right? And I want my students to listen to me, but listening is connected to trust so often. If they trust me, they'll listen. Now, that doesn't mean they'll like it or they'll follow it but I'm planting seeds. And listening to you as parents, I can't imagine as a parent when you say, I want my kids to come back to the faith and they've left. That is just a broken heart. And you're not alone. That's happening a lot. But here's where we step out in trust. We just keep praying and trust God, and this is where patience comes in too. It's got to be in God's time, not yours. And so the idea here is that when you step out in trust, it's not that your kids don't love you or they don't, they've been affected by the world. I mean, we just have to be honest. You can be the best parents in the world, and you're still going to have kids affected by the world. Okay? Hi, Father Eric.
Can I interrupt?
I was going to say, you're asking?
This is a daunting, there's a lot of estrogen in here. Good to see you. Is everybody centric? Good. Well, have fun. I'm going to go hear more confessions, okay? So, anyway, enjoy. This is fantastic.
Isn't this great?
Is really awesome.
These are great women.
Grade school principal.
Sister Rosemary. You put up with a lot. Saint Rosemary. Good to see you all.
So, again, I think it is that sense again, just try to understand even in your own life. Ask yourself, right? Who do I listen to? Do I trust them? Right? We know in our worldly relationships, our human relationships with one another, there are people that we listen to because we trust them. And there are other people we go, oh, okay. And I'll take that with a grain of salt, Trust has so much to do with it. And that's why the discernment of what God is asking of us is so important. And that takes, back to that first presentation, patience. We just have to wait on the Lord. It's not our time, it's the Lord's time. As much as that drives us crazy. Joseph most faithful, right? And Joseph was faithful to God, to Mary, to his son, to his extended family from what we know. And certainly the scripture passage that I love about faith, and especially that first line, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. How, Joseph heard this child was conceived by the Holy Spirit. That was something he couldn't see, had to trust. Okay, he knew it wasn't his, but other than that, he had to trust. And that took faith. That took a lot of faith. And hoped for, things hoped for. The virtue of hope, to me, the theological virtue of hope is one of the things that I continually hang on to every day because I see the despair that is in the world. There's a lot of despair in the world. And as Christians, we're called to be hopeful. So when we get caught up, and I put myself in this, I'm not just talking to you. When we get caught up in this, everything's terrible, I don't know, this is just... What are we saying about the Lord here and about hope? That he can't overcome? That he can't overcome the craziness that is around us at times? It may not be in the way that I think it should be done, or my little list or prayer that I'm saying, but to trust that the Lord is the Lord. And it will be done in his time, his way. And what I hope for is to be with him. Right? That's it. It's pretty simple. We tend to hope for so many things. But the true theological virtue of hope is that we will see the face of God. That is what the virtue of hope is about. It's not about anything else. We can make it about other stuff, even good things. But the virtue itself is about hope that we will finish our journey, we will accomplish our journey, and see God face to face. That is what we hope for. And again, like I said earlier, the idea sometimes that's not what we hear in the world. The world is, by golly, this world, the physical life, that is all that counts. Eat, drink, be merry, amass as much stuff as you can. That's all that really matters. And it's easy to get kind of sucked into that if we're not reflecting. If we're not asking ourselves every day, am I living like I hope to be in the presence of God? That is the most important thing to me. That's what we're talking about when we talk about faith and hope. In the litany, we also hear lover of poverty, which for me is detachment. It's really kind of interesting when you understand Joseph. Joseph, like somebody said, he takes off for Egypt. He had a life, right? I mean, he had a life. And when take Mary and the child into your home, he had a home. He had a life. And then all of a sudden, boom, it changed. And he had to leave his home. And he had to leave his work. But he had the most important thing with him. The Blessed Virgin and Christ. I think so often, and this is my great sin, one of my great sins, I got a list. But anyway, it's so easy to think I need that, and I need that, and I need that, right? It's so easy that, we're surrounded by material things all the time. And so, we check our account balance. Yeah, I can afford to buy that. Instead of maybe asking myself, do I need it? Do I really need it? I was talking to some of my nieces and nephews, and, the idea that we kind of judge whether we should have children by what we can give them, right? Well, I want to be able to give them everything I didn't have. I said, boy, maybe God knew what he was doing, not blessing me with children, because I would have gave him exactly what I got. Nothing. I should say no, the love of my parents, obviously, the love of my family. But that's that worldly piece, isn't it? We part of being responsible is, I need to take care of these children. Of course we do, right? They're our gift. But sometimes what we think they need, it's more just what they want. It's not what they need, right? And what do they need? They need love. They need Jesus. There you go. Pretty simple. And a roof over their head to keep them warm, right? But the idea here, I think, when we talk about detachment, it's not that the material world is evil. I mean, God became human, so it couldn't be evil, right? He became one of us, became human. The material world, but it's when we think we just need more and more and more and more and more. And we judge goodness based on what we got, the stuff we got, versus who we are and who God's calling us to be able to detach from stuff. And this was this is, God bless my brother, an amazing man. He always says, I put a few bucks aside, and if I see a homeless person, or somebody on the road asking for money and I stop, I'll give them a couple bucks, And, in my head, I'm always thinking, well, first of all, I think it's a scam. Second of all, I don't want to roll down my window. I'm a woman. What if they, reach in and try to grab me, right? These are the things that go through my head. So I've been praying about this. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not about the money. It's about other things. But am I really trusting the Lord here? Or am I trying to control all this? So the other day, I'm pulling out a Walmart over in Glendale. And I stop, because you have to stop, cars are whizzing by. And there's a guy with a sign, homeless, anything you can give or whatever. And I thought, okay, Lord, this is it. I'm going to give this guy money, and if he reaches in and kills me, oh well. If he uses it for drugs, it's on him. I gave it for the right reason, right? So I reach in my wallet, and I just pulled out, money, and handed, and rolled down my window, and he came over, and I handed it to him, and he looked at it, and his eyes got great big, thank you. Okay, thanks, it's okay, step away from the car. But, and afterwards I thought, okay, this is what you gotta do, right? That is that detachment piece. Again, notice, it wasn't like I'm attached to this money, but what am I attached to? I was attached to kind of a judgment on whether that person was going to use it the way they should use it. I was attached to personal safety. I was attached to things that I had to start letting go of. Now, granted, I'm not going to get out of my car in neighborhoods that are scary, right? You got to use kind of some sense here in all of this. But sometimes fear can keep us from doing what God's calling us to do. If we don't detach, not just from material things, there's spiritual poverty means we got to get rid of stuff that keeps us back from God. So often we think only of material stuff. Well, I have to give this away, or I got to give that away. No, it's more than that. We are called to a spiritual poverty, which means we have to detach from anything that is keeping us from the Lord's work. And if that's fear, if that's judgment on somebody else, whatever it is, and that's hard. Model of workers, and we touched on that this morning, so I just, again, I think it's so important for us to understand that work has a dignity, and it is so important. And when I have these conversations with my students about, like, political things or whatever, there's an idea that, well, yes, of course we want to care for people who can't care for themselves, but St. Paul says if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. Now, he's talking about people that can work and are choosing not to, right? He's not talking about people that can't work for some reason or other. And I told this to my students. I said, the worst thing we can do for a person's human dignity as a society is to encourage them not to work by rewarding them for not working. Because that flies in the face of their dignity. It's saying to them, you got nothing to offer. You got nothing to offer. We've all got something to offer. All of us. And that doesn't mean we don't care for people when they're, when they're in great need, those kinds of things. But I think we have to seriously understand the dignity of work. And I'll tell you, sometimes, again, the world plays into this, right? I remember thinking, woo, Social Security, I can retire. No, I can't, but there is, right, we work, thinking of retirement, right? Like retirement is the panacea of life. Well, what does that say about work? That means like, okay, we're just drudging through this. So we get to the fun stuff over here, right? And not saying we shouldn't retire. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying, and probably a lot of you that are retired already know this. Okay, so maybe you're not doing a job, or your kids are grown up and up that. you are finding other ways to be of service, right? Through volunteering or things like that. Because it's important. You know, God has given you gifts and talents. You are to use those. It is a part of your dignity. It is a part of his plan that we do that. And so we can't just, say, yeah, well, okay, I'm retired, so I don't care. I'm not doing anything anymore. Okay? No. God has given us so much. And in retirement, we may be called to do it in other ways. That's all. But that's our challenge. And if we're still working, our challenge is to understand that this is a good thing. We can make it good. God has redeemed work. Okay? It's not supposed to be this awful, terrible thing that we have to do. I remember talking to some of my students. I said, my first job was in a pet store. My second job was in a bank. And I said, those were all opportunities to sanctify work. I was given opportunities every day to be the face and hands of Christ, even though I couldn't talk about Jesus, right? You'd get people that come in and throw their checkbook at you. You guys screwed up, you go, I'm not overdrawn. Okay. You smile, right? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Leave that checkbook and I'll balance it tonight after work for you and pick it up tomorrow morning. Maybe we're wrong. I don't know. Right? So this idea of we can only do it in certain ways, right? We can only be the hands and feet of Christ in certain ways is untrue. We are called as laity to sanctify the world. Joseph wasn't a priest, but he helped sanctify the world by what he did where he was. And kind of the last piece here, I think, that is so important for us, especially in this day and age, and this is taken from, again, from the litany, solace of the afflicted, hope of the sick, patron of the dying, right? And I remember thinking and reading and thinking, what a great way to go, right? If you think of Joseph, holding the hand of Mary and the hand of Christ. Who doesn't want to go that way, right? I'm thinking, geez, I hope that's what happens to me. I hope that Christ is holding one hand and Mary's holding the other and that Jim's in the room somewhere. but this idea, I think, again, the solace of the afflicted, hope of the sick, patron of the dying. This picture, I brought this picture in today. It was back on the St. Joseph's table. And this will tell you how lame I am sometimes, how it takes me a while to... I brought this to a number of retreats I was giving, and I talk about, Joseph and Christ at his feet, playing with the nails, that he doesn't know someday those will hold him to the cross. And one of the RCA people said to me, yeah, and it's really cool how it shadows the cross. And I said, it is? It was hanging on my wall for years and I never saw it.
This is beautiful. You can see.
Yeah, can you see the cross? Yeah. So when I think about suffering, right? We all are going to suffer. We're not going to get out of this life without suffering. You might be lucky and get out of the life without physical pain, but you're not going to get out of life without suffering. And when I start to feel sorry for myself, as after I lost Jim, I was apt to do, I would look at this and I would think, who am I to think suffering's not going to be a part of my life? That's what I love about walking into Catholic churches with crucifixes. It's right in front of you. It's not an empty cross. He's hanging on it. To remind us This is life. But you know what? It's not the end. But it's the tool. It's the way we deal with it that leads us to salvation and what he did for us. And so I think here is a key for us as disciples. Ask yourself how you deal with suffering. I think, and I'm not just talking about maybe a personal suffering, but even suffering in the world. Despair in the world. How do you deal with it? We are supposed to be joy-filled people. We're supposed to be hallelujah people, even in the midst of suffering. Now think about that. If we do this, certainly people will be attracted to that. How can they do that, right? How can they do that with what they're going through? When I was a pastoral associate at Miller City, New Cleveland, I got a call that I was doing an exercise in Christian living in Perrysburg, and I got a call that weekend that one of our young people in the parish I was ministering in had been killed in a car accident, 21. And it was in December, and so I said, okay, I'll be coming back. So I came back and did music and helped get the funeral ready and everything. And I want to say it was probably the next weekend, because it was a couple weeks before Christmas that this happened. And like the next weekend, her dad, who was like in his 50s, they were at a Christmas party, he just dropped over dead. So here was this woman who had her daughter killed in a car accident 1 week, and the next weekend her husband drops over dead. And I think, oh my gosh, how do you do that? A woman of faith. Let me tell you, here comes the ugly crying. But she had such faith. And I'm sure shock, all that was a part of it. But as she moved through the whole process, she was a human being, she just found that hope, right? That they were face to face with God. And no matter her pain, remember that self-giving love? She was able to think of them. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing for me to do with my husband. Okay, I'm hoping he's with God. Yeah, that's nice. Because you want him here, right? But just think, that self-giving love, to be so connected to the Lord, that when a loved one dies, even though the grief you feel sits with you, there is still joy, knowing that they're going to be with the Lord. People need to see that in a suffering world. And when you see that, that attracts you. We wonder why people aren't attracted to the faith. What are we doing to show them the joy of the faith? What it does for us, what love of the Lord is all about, how the Lord loves us through all of this. Right? And that's, I think, a good reflection for us as we look at this affliction and sick and dying. We all know people who are sick. We all know people who may be dying or have died. And we're very empathetic to that, and we walk with them and we listen to them. But in our hearts, we know that's what we're all hoping for, right? That's what we're all hoping for. But is it, St. Augustine says, Lord, give me chastity, but not yet. I think we do that with heaven. Lord, I want to be in heaven, but not yet. Okay? So it's that same thing that we live with. How do we be in the world, not of it? How do we deal with all of this, all of these sufferings and pains, and yet know they're temporary, right? They're temporary. but we're still human. And so that's when we just have to give it to God. And we don't do it just once. We keep doing it. I heard somebody say, well, I gave it to God. And I'm like, no. You keep giving it to God. Okay? You don't just give it once and then say, okay, I gave it, because it's going to come back and sit with you again. You got to keep giving it. Every time it tries to come back to you, you keep giving it. You just keep giving it to him. So Joseph certainly shows us how to do that, because the patron of a happy death, right? Jesus and Mary were with him, and we can only hope that he will be with us when our time comes. So I'm going to pull up the litany here, because I want to kind of stay on track with you here, if I can find it. I think it's right here, if I'm not mistaken, unless I closed it. Ooh, there it is. So let's kind of close out this presentation with the litany, and then we'll talk a little bit about the joys and sorrows as our closing prayer. I'll say this side, and then you say the other side, okay? Lord, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy on us. Christ, hear us.
Christ, graciously hear us.
God, the Father of heaven,
Have mercy on us.
God, the Son, Redeemer of the world,
Have mercy on us.
God, the Holy Spirit,
Have mercy on us.
Holy Trinity, one God,
Have mercy on us.
Holy Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
renowned offspring of David,